Now to the civil war in Syria and the growing humanitarian crisis there. We don't talk about it as much on the news every day, but it is getting so much worse in some parts of the country. The Syrian government and its Russian allies have been conducting airstrikes on Idlib, the rebel-held province in northern Syria, and civilian targets are being repeatedly hit. The British charity Save the Children says more children have died in Idlib in the last 4 weeks than in all of last year. And in southern Syria, as if that weren't enough, thousands of displaced civilians are going with almost no food, water, or medicine, some of them starving, even though a U.S. military outpost is just 10 miles away. But it's not helping. CNN's political analyst Josh Rogin, a Washington Post columnist, has been looking into that. Talk to us about what's going on with these people, these displaced people in Syria who don't have enough food, water, or medicine to survive.
There are about 30,000 innocent civilians living in the Rukban internally displaced persons camp 10 miles away from the Tanf U.S. military base in southeast Syria. They had been struggling but getting by based on intermittent UN aid convoys. But the Russian government and the Assad regime stopped allowing those aid convoys months ago. And for complicated reasons, the U.S. government won't feed them. So they're literally starving to death in the desert. No food, medicine, or water, no schools, no clinics. The elderly and the young are the most vulnerable. They're begging on Facebook and Twitter for help. They want to be transported to non-Assad held areas or fed. And right now, neither of those things are happening, and they're suffering greatly.
Why won't the U.S. help?
I talked to Jim Jeffrey, the U.S. Special Representative for Syria, about this last weekend. He said that the U.S. government is still trying to work the diplomatic channel with Russia, and that if the U.S. government starts feeding these people, it will be acknowledging responsibility for their well-being, a responsibility they may not be able to fulfill. To me, that sounds like a recipe for continued starvation of these people, because essentially, as long as the Assad regime holds the key to them eating, there's a lot of incentive for the Assad regime never to let them eat. Now, the U.S. government and Jeffrey are right in the sense that the U.S. military presence in Syria is not assured. It's possible we may not be able to feed them later, but there are a lot of people in Washington feel like that's no excuse not to feed them right now.
What are they saying? You say a lot of them are calling for help on social media. What types of messages are they putting out?
So they've started a campaign. They're cut off from the world. There's no roads out of the camp. But they've started a social media campaign called The Voice of Rukban to plead for any and all assistance. They would love to be moved to the north or east to Iraq, or simply to be given the food and water to survive. What they say is that they're watching their children dying and they can't do anything about it. What they're saying is that they're grateful to be under the protection of U.S. forces because it keeps the Assad regime, ISIS, and Iranian troops at bay. And they don't want to be starved into the decision of going back to Assad-held areas where they will shortly be conscripted, detained, or killed. They are on their last legs, and if we don't feed them soon, they will surely not be saying much for much longer.
How long has it been since they've received a food shipment?
The last aid convoy was in February. People on the ground say it was enough to feed about 10,000 people for a few days. All right, that's 6 months ago, and there's still 30,000 people there. There used to be smuggling routes, but those have largely been cut off by Assad, Russian, and Iranian forces. They live inside this security zone that surrounds the Tanf base, and the soldiers that help Americans fight ISIS in the area are recruited from the camp. So the U.S.-aided soldiers get to eat, but their family and friends are left to starve. It's an untenable situation that's getting worse by the day.
All right, we'll continue to keep our eye on this story.